Enjoy! Storyboard and illustrated by Natalie Lowe. Japan Adventure Project. Ninjas were originally from Japan, and they attacked after nightfall. Strategy was a very important skill that all ninjas must possess. For example, they would dress up as everyday people and use everyday items as weapons, so no one will suspect anything. Ninjas, they do things like raid and terrorize other people. They would attack upon night requests, and they were allowed to work in the shadows as long as they achieved their missions. At the time, they were called entering from afar. Ninjas were actually a professional spying job during the age of the samurais. The origin goes way back to the 12th century and were pretty scarce. They were also not shown a lot of interest because they mostly came from the lower class, and all the attention went to the samurais. Around the 14th centuries, the ninjas became more popular because there were more fighting and action which called for spies. In the 18th century was when the ninjas really started becoming popular in books and drama. Over time, ninjas has developed from spies to kid movies and comics. Nowadays, people write stories about ninjas walking on water with superpowers or turning invisible. The sport sumo is a type of wrestling that has dated way back from over 1,500 years ago. Many ancient Japan tradition ties into sumo wrestling. It became a professional sport in Japan in 1909. Japan is the only country that takes this sport professionally. It's kind of like Japan's own version of martial arts. Ancient wall paintings suggest that sumo used to perform during religious rituals for the gods. Also, they think they might have performed sumo for the gods to determine how successful they were at farming. In the 17th and 18th century, they had matches during court ceremonies. When a sumo wrestler made your baby cry, it was actually surprisingly considered good luck. One well-known sumo wrestler that is 53 years old is Konoshiki. Konoshiki is 633 pounds and just 6 foot tall. He is the second highest ranked sumo wrestler. Konoshiki is also the heaviest known wrestler, which earned him the name the dump truck. Asasaru is one of those who are ranked first in the sumo league. He is surprisingly only 340 pounds and just like Konoshiki, 6 foot tall. Now, sumo is a popular sport even in places like South Korea, Turkey, and Mongolia. It's also a form of professional entertainment. Considering 71% of Japan is mountain terrain and Japan has 109 volcanoes, it is very likely that volcanoes has a big influence in Japan's geography and daily life. Volcanoes is a very important symbol and landmark. For example, Mount Fuji was a very important symbol to Japanese culture, myth, tradition, and legend. But this wasn't always the case. Until the Meiji Restoration, which occurred in 1868, Mount Fuji was considered scarce to Japanese people. This gigantic volcano is located on the Honshu Island, and it is now a dormant volcano. At the height of 3,776.24 meters and 12,389 feet tall, Mount Fuji is the highest and the most honored volcano. The volcano last erupted on December 16, 1707, which was caused by an earthquake that hit on October 26, 1707. This eruption caused ashes that flew all the way as far as Tokyo, 100 kilometers and 60 miles away. Another famous eruption that occurred in 2011 was when the Shinamodake volcano erupted 2 days after the Tohoku earthquake and the tsunami. This eruption began on January 19th, then on January 26th at 7:30, the eruption activity increased. This was the greatest eruption of Shimodake since 1959. Although many volcanoes are now dormant, they are still very important to Japan culture and tradition. Japanese castles were made to defend important and strategic sites like ports, river crossings, and crossroads. The castles were made were mainly made out of wood and stone, but most of the wood were destroyed over the years. Most of the castles incorporated landscape in their defenses. Japanese castles came into their best-known form around the 16th century. Many castles were first built in the Sengoku period, also known as the Age of the Civil War, 1467 to 1603. One of the finest surviving pieces is the Henji Castle, also known as the White Heron Castle. The history of the Henji Castle started when a fort was built on a hill. However, another person demolished the fort and built the Henji Castle on the hill in 1333 instead. The castle stayed undamaged throughout many bombings throughout World War II and throughout the earthquake in 1995, known as the Great Hanshin Earthquake. The Henji Castle was significantly remodeled in 1581 by Toyotomi Hideyoshi, a Japanese warrior general and samurai. Also, he's a politician of the Sengoku period. To preserve this building, they had to close the castles for several years, and they reopened the castles in March 27, 2015. They removed decades of dust. The roof that was originally gray is back to its original color, white. Now the Henji Castle is the most visited castle in Japan, and it's also a World Heritage and a treasure. Have you ever wondered how Japan came to be? Well, Japanese myths has it that it all started with two gods, Zenagi and Zenami. I have two different myths beliefs that I have to tell you about. The first one started long ago when all elements of life was mixed together to form the germ of life. This germ started to mix until the heavy part started to sink and the lighter part rose. Out of the heavier part became a muddy sea that started to cover and sink, and life was created. A god grew from the ground as a plant, and then he grew all the way to the clouds. Then the god became lonely and created other gods. The last two gods he created was the most special. They were Zenagi and Zenami. One day the two of them were walking when suddenly they wondered what's beneath the ocean. They glanced down, and with one thrust of his staff, clumps of mud arose from the water but fell back down. Later that mud became Japan and its island. The second story is quite similar to the first one. When the world was still young, Zenagi and Zenami were commanded by the primal gods to create earth. They stood on the floating bridge of heaven and thrust his heavily jeweled spear into the ground. The spear became an island. The two of them got married and round the pillar there. Soon after, Zenami gave birth to the island of Japan, their deities, the god of sea, river, mountain, field, tree, stone, and many more. These are the two stories out of the Japanese myths. Thank you for watching, and I hope you learned something about Japan. This is my bibliography. Bye.